Hey, 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 welcome to another episode of Dr. Amber's Knowing Girl podcast. I'm so glad to be here with you all. Um, Another day talking about life, parenting, personal development, evolution, reparenting, all the things, right? Like all the things. So, if you're new here, thank you for being here. Whether you are listening on the podcast or whether you are watching on YouTube, I'm so glad that you're tuned in today. Also, for anyone who doesn't know me very well, my name is Dr. Amber Thornton. I'm a clinical psychologist based in Washington, D.C. I'm a mom of two, and I am typically on the internet talking about all the things that I just mentioned. I also have a private practice based in DC, and I'm an author. My new book, if you have not pre ordered it yet, is called A Parent's Guide to Self Regulation, a practical framework for breaking the cycles of dysregulation and mastering emotions for parents and kids and children. I'm sorry. That is a very long title, but I promise you, you're going to get so much information in that book. So just pre order your copy if you haven't already. But again, I'm so glad that you all are here. Today, I want to talk about a topic. So this is going to be a good episode, and one because a few months ago, when I knew that I wanted to bring back this podcast, I told myself. I want to talk about all the things that interest me. I want to talk about all the things that bring me joy, that light me up, all the things that are intriguing to me. And so I started to develop this list of topics that I wanted to address or talk about on this podcast. And one of the topics, I'm going to actually read to you exactly what I wrote in my notes app. And a lot of times when I'm writing notes for these episodes or like writing down like initial thoughts that come to mind with regard to something I want to talk about on the podcast, it's not like a complete thought. It's really sometimes it's a question. And so the question that I wrote down and what today's episode will probably be titled, are you the parent your child needs or the parent you once needed? I'm going to read that one more time. Are you the parent your child needs or the parent you once needed? Why are we talking about that today? We are talking about it because of this. I know for me personally, when I became a mom, I started to realize in my own internal process and reflections of motherhood that there were things that I needed to do for my children or for my kids based on what they were giving me in the moment. And it really required me to be very intentional and to be very mindful and considerate of the feedback they were giving me through our relationship, their behaviors, their words, their emotions. Like you have to be in tune with your kid to really know what type of parent do they need. What are the things that they are needing from me in order to guide, in order to instill knowledge, in order to ensure that they become an amazing, gentle, kind, compassionate, strong, intelligent, all the things, human, right? I also started to realize that it depends on the child you have, what type of parent you need to be. So, for instance, I have two kids, and my two kids, while they have some similarities, they're very different kids. They are very different. I literally was looking at them yesterday, and I told my husband, like, they're so different. It's like they look just alike. They love each other, they enjoy each other's company, but they are so different from one another. And so sometimes that means that I have to do different things with them in order to ensure that their needs are met, right? So I'm having this realization and this understanding in my own parenting journey that you have to be in tune and conscious of the child in front of you, the child you have in order to be the parent that they need, right? But then I also started to notice that sometimes there are these internal pulls or these internal motivations that we have within ourselves to be a certain type of parent. And I think that these internal pulls or motivations are influenced by society. I think they are influenced by people around us, our networks, our circles, the people we spend the most time with. They're also influenced by our own understanding of what parenting should be or shouldn't be. Again, given the society that we're in or the generation that we're in. But one big thing that I notice, and what we're really going to focus on today, is sometimes those internal pulls and motivations to be a certain type of parent are influenced by your own inner child needs. Sometimes these needs are unmet needs because if you're listening here today, you're probably an adult. You're not a child anymore. So often I associate the needs of our inner child to be those that are unmet. Maybe, our parents could have done the best job, but sometimes there are things that are missed. They might be emotional needs, they might be relational in nature, but all of us, I believe, have an inner child, that younger version of us that's inside of us still, that still is looking for something, that still is in need of something, that still really desires something, that still really wants something. And if we're not careful, we may begin parenting out of the needs of our inner child. And you might be thinking, okay, well, why is that all that bad, right? Because if your inner child needed it, then clearly it's something of value, right? Like your inner child needs a lot of things, and they're probably not frivolous things. They're important things. They're valuable things. So what's the harm? Well, the harm is this. Your inner child is your inner child, but your inner child is not necessarily your child. Okay. Just like I said, I started off the episode explaining how my two children are very different. So I also think it's safe to assume that my inner child is going to be or could be very different than my children. The needs of my inner child might be vastly different from the needs of my actual children. And so that is the harm. If you are parenting from a place of what your inner child needs or what you once needed, you could be completely missing the mark in terms of what it is that your child needs. So that's what I want us to talk about today. I have a lot of notes that I want to cover because I just think this is such a good topic because many of us are thinking about, okay, reparenting, and this is coming up because we're realizing that so much of our parenting and our journey as mothers or fathers is very much impacted by the experiences that we had as a young child. And especially those experiences that we had that maybe still leave a wound, a hurt, or some sort of unmet need. And if you are not conscious, aware, intentional, you will become this parent that you always needed, but that may not be the parent that your child needs. So I was so elated that this topic came up because I had put this in my notes app. This was something I wanted to make sure that we talk about on this podcast. But then, flash forward to a few weeks ago, I was featured in an Essence article written by the amazing A. Rashawn Meadows Fernandez. I want to make sure I get her name right. She's this amazing writer that is featured in all types of publications. But she reached out to me because she was working on this article for Essence, and the topic was being the parent that your child needs and not the one I wish I had. Um, what are the odds that she's writing this article about this topic that I also wrote in my notes app to make sure that I talk about on this podcast? And so it just felt like the right moment to take this article that she wrote, take this concept that I wanted to address, and we're bringing it together in this episode today. So also what I'll try to do is put this article in the link for today's show notes so that you all can take a look at it and you can read it in your own time. It's an amazing article. And again, the title is I'm Learning to Be the Parent My Children Need and Not the One I Wish I Had. So today I'm going to go through some of this article today, but I really want you all to go back and read it for yourselves too. Okay, let me get to my notes because I have so many notes for you all today. This is going to be good. Okay. So first I want to share a few stories because I think that it can be helpful. It's always helpful when we're talking about topics like this to ground ourselves in like more practical examples. And I'm going to use examples from my own motherhood or parenting journey, but as I am talking about these examples, I also want you all to be thinking about your own kids, your own children, and how this could relate or apply. So I'm going to give you a few examples, one from each of my children, just with regard to how I've noticed that the way that I may have wanted to be parented is in contrast to how they actually need to be parented. So I'm gonna start with my oldest, Cedric. He's 4. He will be 5 in May. So I am almost a 5-year pro. I can't believe I'm about to have a 5-year old. Like, I still feel like a new parent. And I guess that is still new in the grand scheme of things, but it's not new, new. It's like, all right, I've been here. I know what I'm doing, but there's still a lot that I have to learn, right? So, my son, Cedric, some of the notes that I took, and these are, again, for those of you who listen to this podcast, you know that I'm going on this journey of being more personal and reflective and blending that with my professional identity and myself as a psychologist, because it's not just me, the expert, it's also me, the expert, who has had these personal experiences. So I'm realizing that some of what I'm about to share is somewhat vulnerable, but I think it's helpful. So, some of the notes I took about my son. So, for me, what I realized about myself is that growing up, I had a father who was very, very critical. Very, very critical. You know, back in the day, if those of you who are millennials, we would always say, my parent was hard on us. They were hard on us, but they loved us, right? Or, this idea of being hard on your kids was good for your kids. That very much describes how my father raised my brother. And so growing up, I grew up with my mom, my dad, and my little brother. And my father, I witnessed him tending to be more critical and a lot more harsh and harder on my brother. There were a lot of complications, or not complications, but consequences because of that. But what I took from that now as an adult is that I realized that there were definitely times where I believe my brother probably needed a little bit more sensitivity and grace as a young boy. And I just don't think that my father was able to provide that. I think my father did the very best that he could, but for whatever reason, there was not enough sensitivity, not enough compassion, not enough grace for the areas in which my brother may have been struggling and maybe needed a different type of approach. So, growing up with that, that is something that I have observed, witnessed, internalized, taken in. And now, as a parent, I notice that now that I have a husband and a son, I tend to have this sensitivity around boys and their fathers. There's the sensitivity for me where I really want to see compassion. I want to see grace. I want to see gentle guidance. And I noticed myself at times in the past having this very strong reaction when my husband attempts to discipline or guide or direct my son. This is something I sat with for a really long time because I was just like, okay, what's happening here? I know that sometimes I don't like their interactions, but I also know that when I hear or see things between the two of them, it really just takes me back to my childhood when I'm thinking about my brother and my father. And so, upon a lot of reflection, y'all, a lot of reflection, I started to realize like, I feel like instead what is happening is that their interactions are triggering something in me that needs to be healed. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with how my son and my husband are interacting, right? More so, there is this big sensitivity for me around sons and fathers and compassion and gentleness that needs to be addressed with me and not within my family. You know what I'm saying? And so, what I wrote down is I had to realize that this reaction actually had less to do with what was going on between my husband, myself, and my son, and had way more to do with the experiences growing up with a critical and a very harsh father. I wanted to parent, or, and again, I'm reading my notes, I wanted to parent in parentheses, I wanted my husband to parent in a way that felt more gentle and more compassionate, not realizing that in the moment, what my husband was giving is more likely what my son needed in the moment versus trying to overcompensate for what I wasn't able to witness between my own father and my sibling, right? So let me break that down again. When I was able to be more clear and more objective of like what's actually going on in my home current day, I started to see my husband is being totally appropriate. Like whatever my son is doing in there and whatever my husband is doing, absolutely needed, absolutely called for, absolutely appropriate. My son has the very best father for him, right? And it took me being able to step outside of what my inner child is still feeling hurt or scared or fearful about to really see, hey, yo, this is what I needed to see as a child, but it's not necessarily reflective of what's actually happening here. What's happening here, present day, with my son and my husband, completely appropriate. And I'm so glad that my son has my husband. However, I have to do my own work of making sure that I am not trying to overcompensate or wishing my husband to overcompensate for a need that I did not receive as a child. So that is one very personal example of how this shows up for me and my son. You know, just realizing that, hey, that sensitivity, that fear, that, I don't want it to be too harsh. I don't want it to be too heavy. That's not really indicative of what's happening here. And rather, it was a fear and a wound that I need to continue to address as an adult for my inner child. Okay, let's move on to an example for Eden. So Eden is my 2-year old who will be 3 in April, y'all. That's my little Aries girl. She just fiery. Shout out to the Aries. And also, side note, I know I haven't been doing astrology or tarot sessions in the episodes because I decided to take that stuff and make it its own episode. So probably in the coming weeks, we will have another full astrology and tarot episode. But I also hope to do more of that on my YouTube channel separately in the time to come. So just stay tuned for that if you are looking for that. Okay, so let's see what's going on with Eden. So this example with Eden is still personal, but a lot less intense than that first example. So with Eden, what I realized about myself is, and what I wrote down is, I always imagined that I would be a very affectionate mother, one who gives love and kisses and hugs. And for the most part, I am. As a parent, though, I've noticed that my daughter doesn't always lead with physical affection. She just does not. Like, that's not her thing at all. What I've noticed about her, which is so interesting, she's very much a words of affirmation girl. Like, we could be just sitting, having dinner, having a good time as a family, and then all of a sudden she'll just be like, I love my family. Or I crack up at this because I think this is so funny. Like, with me and my husband, if like he does something for her, she'll be like, Daddy, you're a good man. You're a good daddy. I love you, Daddy. You are a good daddy. Just hyping him up. Like, the affirmations just endless with this girl. Or she'll be like, Daddy, you're so strong. Or when I'm working out, she'll be like, Mommy, you're so strong. You're the best mommy. I love you. So very much a word for affirmation, word of affirmations. But when it comes to physical affection, that's not necessarily something that she really leads with. And what I've also noticed is that um, she doesn't always want my hugs and kisses. She doesn't always want that. And she will absolutely let you know when that's not something that she wants. So for instance, I'll try to lean in and give her a kiss. She'll block it real quick. And for a while, I noticed that hurt my feelings. When it first happened a few times, it was like, okay, what's going on here? Luckily, in that moment, I was aware enough and conscious enough to know, hey, we don't force kids to provide physical affection to anybody, not even their parents, right? So take this moment, walk away, and figure out what's happening inside of you, girl. What's happening inside of you? When I reflected, I started to notice that for me, there's something around physical affection that I likely probably needed more of as a child. I also came from a home, and I think many of you can relate to this, where our homes were loving, our homes provided structure and stability, but they didn't always provide all of the warm and fuzzies, emotionally and or physically, right? So in my home there was a lot of love, but not a lot of physical affection. There weren't a lot of hugs, weren't a lot of kisses. It was not that. And so I thought that I would be the mom who would give a lot of physical affection, because I know that that's not something I received a ton of as a child. And I wanted to make sure that my children will get all the love, all the attention, all the affection. Again, not to say my parents didn't love me. My parents loved me more than any other humans in this earth, okay? But physical affection just was not their love language either, I suppose, even if it was mine. And so I had to realize that just because I, as a child, needed more physical affection does not necessarily mean that my children will want that from me, right? And so I wrote here, I realized that as a child, my parents were not very affectionate physically, and it's something I believed I would have benefited to have more of. My push to give that to my kid has to be about them wanting it or needing it, and not about me trying to give it because I didn't receive it as a child, right? So again, this whole process, the whole point of this is really to decipher and determine, is this you and something you need, or is this something that your child wants and needs? And it can be confusing a little bit to really decipher, right? Excuse me. So now I actually want to go to the article. I want to read a little bit of this article for you all so we can really just kind of dive into it. I actually am going to read the first 3 paragraphs because I just think it'll help set the tone. And then I want you all to go to the article and read it. So again, written by A. Rashawn Meadows Fernandez, and she started the article as this. I don't like it when you compliment me all the time, my 4-year-old daughter told me in response to my consistent affirmations of her hair. I was taken aback. During childhood, I wanted someone to tell me I was beautiful more than anything. I couldn't comprehend why my daughter would refuse reminders and affirmations of her beauty. A lack of confidence and other unmet needs were the core of my determination to raise children who felt affirmed holistically. But her needs conflicted with my traumas and triggered my ego as someone who was raised to see talking back and challenging a parent's absolute authority as disrespect. I didn't believe she was wrong, but I hadn't experienced such a visceral reaction to her asserting her own needs or for the process to start so early. The moment forced me to see that much of my parenting strategy was rooted in my unmet needs, not my children's best interests. I shared my experience and reaction online, and hundreds of comments told stories of folks who were affirmed based on their assumed needs instead of authentic ones. Woo! Ooh, I almost fell out with that. Like, wow. I just have to read that last one. That I'm going to read this whole last paragraph again. The moment forced me to see that much of my parenting strategy was rooted in my unmet needs and not my children's best interest. I shared my experience and reaction online, and hundreds of comments told stories of folks who were affirmed based on their assumed needs instead of authentic ones. If we are not careful, we will assume that our children need and want all the things that we never received and never had. If we are not careful, we will assume that our children absolutely will want the hugs, absolutely will want the kisses, absolutely will need all of the gentleness and the compassion. Kids do need gentleness and compassion, but I'm making a point here. We will completely miss the moments when they need space, or when they need a different type of love, or when they need more structured guidance. We will miss it all if we're so stuck in our own inner experiences and our own old wounds. Okay, so let's talk about this other part. I'm going back to my notes. So again, go on to read the article, but I want to read a few quotes from the article. So I was quoted in the article, y'all. So I'm going to read you that part. What I said was, we often assume that our children will be similar to us or have similar needs, but that is not always the case, says Thornton, noting unmet childhood needs can be loud and demanding and all consuming, which they can. Right? It's like if you are not doing that personal work as a parent, those unmet childhood needs will just get louder and louder and louder. And that's where reparenting comes in, which we will talk about later in this episode. An over focus on your own needs doesn't allow us the mental and emotional capacity to learn and understand our child's unique needs, because you are you're basing your parenting off of what you wish you had and or hoped you could have, right? And so we have to find that balance of acknowledging and understanding the ways that we have been impacted as an adult in our childhood, while also still having enough capacity to really see what's happening in front of us with our kids. There was also another mental health professional that was quoted in this article. Her name is Jasmine Price. She's a licensed clinical professional counselor. And I'm going to read some of what she said. In her portion of the article, she says that when our inner child is triggered, we do whatever is necessary to soothe them, even if it goes against our child's needs. Wow. She highlights how prioritizing our traumas surface in parenting, saying it shows up as overprotectiveness, hypervigilance, emotional reactivity, difficulty recognizing and validating a child's need, and avoidance and detachment, even if the desire to connect is there. Hear that? So basically, a parent can have all of the best intentions, the desire to closely connect with their kid, the desire to raise this amazing human. However, if that inner child is not soothed and calmed and it's just kind of like running rampant, that parent will never be able to connect with the child in the way that they really desire, because they are not able to really see the child's needs. Everything they do could be going against the child's actual needs because it's so based in the inner child. Okay, so let's talk about, hold on, y'all. Let me check my time because I actually have. So after this, I'm going to my son's, they have like a Black History Month performance and he's performing with his class. So I got to make sure I wrap this up in like 10 minutes, y'all. Okay, but we're almost at the end, so it's fine. So now let's talk about parenting versus reparenting, because I think this is the part where it's like, okay, well, what do we do about this? How do you actually know how you need to be parenting, and how do you know if it's coming from your child's actual needs versus your own inner child needs? So let's talk about the differences between parenting and reparenting. Parenting. Parenting is for your children and solely based on their own needs, okay? That period. Period. When we think of parenting, when you are parenting for your children, for your child, and their specific needs only. Only. Period. Okay? But reparenting is different. Reparenting is for our inner child and solely based on any unmet or lingering needs we continue to have into adulthood. Okay, so you see that there's a very big difference in those definitions. Similar words for sure. They both have parenting in it, but one is parenting, which is for our kids, and the other is reparenting, which is for us and our inner child and the lingering or unmet needs we continue to have as an adult. So, how do we know whether we're parenting or being triggered by our unmet childhood needs? So, I'm going to provide you all with three guiding questions. And I want you all to take these, reflect in the moment as we're talking, but also write these down, come back to this episode so you can really be thinking, okay, how do I know in any given moment, am I parenting or am I reparenting? But is my reparenting interfering with my children, right? So, one, are you making space for processing your own traumas or your own childhood experiences? That's the question I'm asking for you today. That first question. Are you making space for processing your own traumas and your own childhood experiences? Why do I ask this? Because if you're not making space for your own childhood experiences, your own traumas, or processing those experiences, it will not allow you to develop the insight you need to really figure out in any given moment, am I parenting or should I be reparenting? Right? So what I said is this will help you develop more insight into what it is that is yours and what is not yours. This will also help you develop more insight into the ways that you are being affected or have been impacted in the past by old parenting experiences. And then lastly, continuing this work will allow you to understand your parenting journey and how it's influenced or how you might be triggered by certain circumstances, etc., etc. Number 2, in any given moment, I want you to ask yourself this: is this parenting approach soothing, supportive, or guiding for my child? Or is it soothing, supporting, and guiding me? Right? So here's the thing: when you ask yourself that question, that first part, is this parenting approach soothing, supportive, and guiding for my child? If the answer is yes, wonderful, that's parenting. And let's be clear, something that is soothing, supportive, or guiding, it doesn't always mean your child's gonna like it, right? Like, for instance, sometimes we have to say no to our children, and that is still supportive and guiding of where they need to go and who they need to become. Okay. So that doesn't always mean they're going to like it, but we instinctively should know when something is soothing, supportive, and guiding for our children. However, if the answer is no, when you honestly answer that question and you realize, this is actually something that's soothing and supportive and guiding for me, then that's how you know, this is maybe not how I should be parenting, and rather, this is something I need to be doing for myself in my reparenting journey. So, for instance, I want to go back to the example with Eden, right? So, how if I ask myself, hey, smothering her with hugs and kisses, is this supportive and soothing and guiding for her? Well, if she's constantly like flinching and like backing away, the answer is no. The answer is no. If she keeps having to set boundaries with me and telling me no, the answer is no. But rather, is it something I'm doing because it feels soothing and supportive and guiding for me? Yes, that's how I know, okay, this is not something that's appropriate for my parenting and rather something that I need to address in my reparenting journey. Lastly, one more thing I want you to be considering. Ultimately, healthy and progressive parenting requires deepening insight and connection with ourselves, which is so necessary for adequate parenting to happen. So, what I want you to be doing in the takeaway for today, I want you to continue to develop and hone your intuition as a parent and your relationship with yourself. Because if you are not connected with yourself, if you don't know yourself, if you don't know what has been impacting you or what you're impacted by, how will you be able to answer these questions honestly? How will you be able to know if you are parenting versus if this is something you need to be using in your reparenting journey? I want you to continue to sit with yourself. I want you to make space for yourself. Meditative mindfulness is always good for this, but really just those moments where you're with yourself and you really connect with yourself. It's so important. Also, spend time with your inner child within you who still may need so much, so you don't confuse that inner child with your own child. And so you might be asking, well, how do I spend time with my inner child? You can do this through personal reflection, just really taking yourself back to those younger years and thinking about who you were or the images that come up when you think of your inner child. You can do this through journaling, journaling about what you feel like your inner child still needs or what they didn't receive or what they might need. Or you can even put yourself in the perspective of if I were the parent of my inner child, what would I do? And that also can help you connect with your inner child to really understand what are their needs. And then you can really decide, okay, this is what my inner child needs. Is this also something that my child needs? If the answer is no, switch your parenting approach to meet the needs of your children. All right, you all. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let me know what you think about it. Give me a shout out on Instagram. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment in the episode today to let me know exactly how it landed for you. Or give me a rating on your podcasting app to let others know that you enjoyed this episode. We will talk soon. Bye.